Hello and welcome all to this next portion of the HULFT Digital Transformation webinar series. HULFT, we are a leading software company providing data integration and digital transformational services and support. Our goal is to provide increased efficiency and profitability through data and process transparency. Today's session, we have quite a bit to go through. The topic is why most RPA or robotic process automation projects fail and how you can prevent it. I am Adam Erickson. I am the VP of Sales for HULFT. I'm joined today by our Head of Digital Transformation, Jay Greer, who is based out of Atlanta. And today, Jay will be talking to the topic at hand. If you have specific questions at the bottom of your screen, you can do a Q&A and send them in. And we will do our best to get to them either during the course of the presentation or at the end of the presentation. At the end, we will send out the recording for everyone. And as we may go long, if we do, please feel free to stay on longer or just cancel out and we'll send you the presentation and you catch up anything you missed out on. We do have some of our previous webinar series on demand. So feel free to go to the links and check out what we have from our past topics. So getting into this today, I will hand it over to Jay and let Jay go through these slides. I will be asking him a few clarification questions throughout, but once again, if you have specific questions you'd like, feel free to post them up. Mr. Greer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. And good morning or afternoon, everyone. As Adam said, my name is Jay Greer. I head digital transformation. And as such, to briefly put this all into context, I have a 30-year background as a technologist working with everyone from the Department of Defense all the way through to Fortune 1000 companies. So I look across the horizon of technologies within industries to ensure that they are suitable to maximizing the efficiency and productivity and profitability for those businesses. And today, relative to the topic of conversation, we're going to dig into RPA, what it means for your business, if it's scalable, if it's the right fit, and how it intersects with other technologies. Now, specifically, before we do a deep dive, let's really talk about what RPA is. And effectively, it's software platforms that are performed to replace repetitive tasks of human workers, which is to say anything that human hands can do, key entry, video scrapes, things of that nature. That's what that's what RPA was born to do. And effectively, it's designed to operate error-free, to increase costs, and efficiency, and reduce costs, increase efficiency, and speed processing. Some examples of this are what you see listed here on the screen: installing security patches, aggregating simple information into to one place, doing simple cut and paste functions from one application to another. But what we've discerned over the past is that RPA is actually good for very simplistic tasks. When it comes to leveraging business intelligence and business logic, RPA tends to struggle. Now, that's not to disparage it. That's simply to say that it is designed to do a certain thing. Now, in the past, as you can see on the chart that Adam's put up, the RPA hype, or where RPA is in the hype cycle, is now entering into the trough of disillusionment. So it went through its peak of inflated expectations because everybody thought that RPA could do just about anything. And the truth of the matter is that it's only as smart as its programs. And the struggle there is that you have to impart to the programmer and those who are implementing the RPA solution what the minutia is behind those business processes. That is for you to glean what the institutional knowledge is inside of your corporation, share that across the board, and make sure that your RPA function is mimicking that accurately. Another challenge here is that those RPA processes have to successfully be able to interact with one another so that should one be erroneous in its output, the others can detect that and adjust accordingly. Without that being the case, you are actually introducing possible flaws into your processes. So RPA tends to do well, as mentioned before, when the processes are simplistic, but when they are fairly complex, when there's poor scope, and when there are other integration challenges, then RPA tends to sort of fall away in its effectiveness. And that's where business process management or business process automation comes into view, and why that is part of a more holistic approach. So RPA should effectively be part of your larger digital vision. That is to say, what piece of the equation does this RPA functionality speak to? And here at HULFT, because of our interaction with so many customers and our large customer base, we've recognized that the best methodology is to, as Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. You have to look across the entire horizon of business operations and understand which part of those operations benefit most from automation and which create the most value for your organization. Another challenge is you have to glean from your operational teams, the folks whose boots are on the ground every day, what that business process truly looks like. Management teams are great at understanding the overarching process, but it is those folks in your organization who do the jobs every day that can actually drill down on what the business process is, what the exception policy is, and what the go forward is relative to those exceptions. And that complex business knowledge or complex process management is what business process automation is all about. It's what we specialize in. So as you look at this graphic, it actually walks you through what those elements are, right? The real-time execution. Are you implementing your process automation for the sake of customer satisfaction, that being internal or external? Removing efficiencies, promoting marketing, right? Optimizing a business process. Those are the things that actually take some fairly complex business logic to maximize. Another element of BPA, or business process automation, is that you want to exchange information inside of your organizations so that each element of your organization is gleaning from it the information that it needs. Your marketing department, your operations teams, your finance and accounting office, they all need different things. They need to get different bits of information from the data lakes that reside inside of your organization. And not only do they need different bits of information, they need that information transformed differently. And that is where an RPA process would struggle.
Now Jay, looking at this, I think in our experience going with customers in the enterprise level, and they're trying to implement change management to gain more efficiency. And when we get into business process management, RPA, I think what we've discovered is that the documentation of a business process is normally lacking, and that there's a lot of legacy ways of doing things that are never re-examined until they're forced into some definition. So with RPA, how does that, as you said, if you build it for what it is today, if a part of the process changes, it breaks the chain. So how do you describe to customers what's the best way to figure out what is your business process?
Right, and I smile. As you know, my experiences have been varied and vast when it comes to that. So again, you start with a very basic principle. You have to define your digital vision. Begin with the end in mind. And as Adam mentioned, that process of knowing front to back what exactly is occurring and having it mapped out and well-defined is actually pretty rare, right? And so to get there and to get there effectively, typically it takes some degree of consultation. I've worked with large industry here in Atlanta that supports the chemical industry and others. And while they are a great high functioning company, many elements of what they were doing on a day-to-day basis was as yet undefined. And when we took a look at it, it was actually ripe for streamlining and for creating some efficiencies. The problem with RPA as a solution in that space is that it would have been functionally broken had they proceeded with RPA just as a solitary solution. But when combined with BPA, they were able to overcome that problem. And so it's important for us to compare RPA and business process management and understand where each two is effective. So as you see listed here, RPA is really tactical. It's something that gets a simplified job done that's not very complex. It's usually something that's intra-departmental. It's done by a programmer sitting down, typing in lines of code that follow a simple script. And it's often a standalone process. Usually the case for RPAs, you could stand it up within several weeks. And it's a low entry point when it comes to a cost factor. Business process management, or BPA, is more strategic. When you're talking about a true digital transformation and adding productivity, profitability, and efficiency to the whole of your organization, you're going to be looking at BPM as your platform of choice, right? Because this is where the enterprise-grade integration starts to happen amongst and between software platforms. It's usually fairly complex. It usually takes a second or third set of eyes to look at your business operations, to understand all of the intricacies of the data that you want to have integrated and how you want to have it streamlined. And then you have to stand that up, right? It's fair to say that it's a more lengthy process because it's a more complex and complicated process, but ultimately it's where you get the greatest gains. And so Forrester's has something called the rule of five. And I think everybody on the call would benefit from understanding this, which is, it's a really simplistic approach. If your RPA function has to determine more than 5 decisions, or cut across more than 5 applications, or duplicate more than 500 mouse clicks, it's probably a bad idea to go with RPA. That's where BPA, BPM is going to suit your organization best.
Now, Jay, as we get into the next slide, I mean, look, I'm a Silicon Valley veteran. The Gartner hype cycle that we went through earlier, it's the terminology of the day. And I know that a lot of our customers get confused on what can do what's a portion of what. And I think in this use case, we're going to go through kind of some of those areas where the terminology will be similar between an RPA vendor company and a BPA like us on what we're talking about doing. So hopefully as you go through this, you can kind of describe where RPA may fit into part of this spectrum, but would not achieve the outcome that was required by our customer.
Sure. So let's just sort of simplify what's happening here and focus mostly on the graphic. In this particular use case, there was an IT service industry where the salespersons had to interface with all of the various departments, and they were effectively the aggregators of the information. They were the keepers of the key. Now that created its own unique set of problems in that information was siloed and it was kept in one part of the organization. But it also created challenges because they had to go out and they had to suss out that information from those various business units. So when that's the case, those individual functions that the salespersons were performing could arguably have been replaced by an RPA process. For instance, if they were pulling the financials from the ERP system, that simple function could have been roboticized. And the same with their, reaching out to the invoicing division. That one simple function could have been roboticized. The problem is that the various business units in the organization was not sharing that information effectively. So for instance, if there was an invoice that came in and it was now running 30 days late and the salesperson needed to follow up with the customer and we needed to be alerted to a FNAO function, a financial and accounting office function that needed to integrate with that. Now the information isn't siloed when it's put through a business process automation formula. That is to say, what we're going to do is we're going to share the information across the whole of the team. We're going to parse that information in a way that's meaningful for each segment of the business operations, and we're going to share it in a way that's meaningful to them. So when you see in this particular instance, the culmination of information across all of the various information systems on the left-hand side of the screen in the highlighted right portion of the graphic, those functions need to talk to each other. And in an RPA environment, they could arguably do so, but it would be very kludgy. The information wouldn't be transformed as needed. And arguably, there would be interconnectivity problems with that as well. And ultimately, getting that information pushed over to the right side of the graphic, interfacing with the sales ops, the F&AO office, the factory division, that would have been an even greater challenge. Now, lastly, you can imagine the amount of confusion and consternation it would cause getting that information shared with the salesperson who may be non-technical, maybe non-finance savvy. Those folks need the information in the way that they can use it. And that's where the functions of extract, translate, load, or basic ETL and business process automation are going to be instrumental in the BPA process to aggregate that information and deliver it to the business functions that need it most.
Well, and I think this leads us into this topic, which is it can cut across all different topics in IT projects, right? It's garbage in, garbage out, and just some of the basic things everyone needs to remember. So whether it's RPA or BPA, general rule of thumb, especially as you've dealt with a multitude of organizations. On the slide, I mean, where are the places most projects fail?
Well, again, most of these projects struggle in that they're not clear. The outcome isn't clearly defined, right? So that's where you'll want to start always, right? And you're going to want to take a very insightful and thoughtful approach to what your digital transformation process should look like. So as you see here, there are really 3 areas that you have to key in on. Identify the use case. And when we call out the gathering of institutional knowledge, it cannot be understated how useful it is to interface, through consultation with the folks who perform the functions on a day-to-day basis. There's so much to be gained from the granular knowledge that they have, because they are going to show you the shortcuts to efficiency. They're going to understand who owns what data and what they need to leverage on a day-to-day basis. And they're going to be able to define the way things are laid out in your organization. The second step of that is to map the solution. And this is where consultation is absolutely the best approach. Having that second set of eyes is going to help you define your scope of work. It's going to open you up to possibilities of solutions that aren't in your organization today, third-party softwares, different services that can be brought to bear, whether those are professional services offered by an RPA company or a BPA company. It's going to help you define your proof of concept, getting you to understand what does a real win look like when it appears in your organization. And when I say that, let's be clear, right? We're not talking about the whole of your organization being digitally transformed overnight, because that's typically not how it happens. It's done in an incremental process in such a way that you're getting the biggest bang for buck or the most value in the shortest amount of time. And it gets stakeholder buy-in, right? So if your functional teams aren't really bought into the idea of the digital transformation, that's going to make it harder to implement, harder to maximize, and you'll have that just sort of innate human resistance to moving forward. And then lastly, you want to increment that in sprints, right? Definitely sticking to the agile process, being able to stand up a demo really, really quickly. And should things not be effectuated the way that you would desire, you want to be able to pivot quickly, get back to step 2 effectively, and start that cycle again.
Now, Jay, you mentioned a few things that, once again, the topic of this is why RPA projects fail. The institutional knowledge, the buy-in of the organization, because ultimately what a lot of projects are attempting to do is to streamline efficiency. And I think in various departments, there are people that have that institutional knowledge, and there are many cases that we've run into where people slow walk the solution because what the organization calls efficiency, they call it out of a job. So in working with stakeholders,
Right.
what type of things have you seen as far as getting the buy-in, allaying the fears? Because ultimately it's still garbage in, garbage out. If I don't know what my process is, I don't know how to improve it. And if someone's been doing the same job for 15 years, they're might not be the biggest proponent of changing the way things are done.
No, I've lived that up close, Adam, and I'm here to assure you that most of us as business leaders make good hiring decisions, and the people that are in our organizations are valuable for many, many reasons. So what tends to happen is that folks are not removed or replaced, they are just better utilized, right? So when you implement a true automation update to your organization, what you're really doing is you are cutting away the things that are, a draw on cost, a draw on efficiency, and reduce profitability in your organization. The faster you can grow, the more customers you can service, the more your organization is going to grow, and the more those personnel are going to be needed. Now, but here's the thing. It's key that before you do that, there has to be that transfer of exactly what's happening today. And then there has to be the real agreement on how to streamline that and make it better. And that, again, speaks to a few different areas of concern. One, how are we better serving our customer? Two, how are we better aligning our internal organizations? And three, how do we maximize what it is that our business mission is today? So a really, really great example of that is an automotive organization where their key challenge was around personnel who were trained in a specific way, but they had no information, no intel about who was trained, what shifts they were working, and how when those personnel were not available, it would reduce the overall productivity of that particular facility. It was costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars to not know that information. And by automating some HR processes and building those into line production scheduling and order processes, we were able to streamline that, connect the right folks with the right mission at the time so that they could always keep their productivity high, and as a result, the profitability.
Now, you had mentioned something earlier that one of the benefits of RPA is the ability to start a project quickly, have someone within a certain department light up something and try to automate a process. Obviously, in the enterprise spectrum, it gets very large and overwhelming, all the different systems and who does what. And ultimately within RPA, I know a lot of early adopters were insurance companies and call centers, everyone with those processes that a bot could be attached to make far more efficient. But within different organizations, automotive manufacturing, et cetera, does it have a plus or minus? I know we have customers across the entire spectrum, but really as you take a look at it within the digital reference model here, where does it kind of fit in?
Now, interestingly, RPA fits in every layer of the stack, but the way that it fits in is what's key here. Typically, when you're roboticizing a process, it's going to remain on each one of those perspective levels, right? It's going to allow IoT devices to talk to one another or back to a central network. It's going to allow your data storage to across platforms, copy and paste a file, right? Do those very simple tasks. The challenge is that it doesn't integrate those various layers of the architecture model very well. That's where a business process automation is going to suit you a lot better. That's why we tend to focus on collaborative efforts top to bottom throughout an organization versus across a simple department or a business unit. So when you start to think of this reference model a little bit differently, what you're going to have in layers 1 through 4 is you're going to have data at a standstill, things that are easily manipulated. But in layers 5 through 7, you're having it's data in motion. Those are processes. They involve people. It's data aggregation. It's things moving, and that is actually the core of a lot of businesses. And so those business processes are what benefit most from automation, in the vertical versus in the horizontal plane.
Now, we're hosting this webinar, so we have a vested stake in the overall automation game. I know I've heard from our customer sets that have deployed some RPA, whether it's UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, the major players. And their question to us is always, okay, I have this going on. Can it connect to a larger BPM initiative, right? Does RPA play well with other technologies? Does the HULFT technology play well with RPA? Can I take what I've already done and leverage it to do 1 + 1 = 3, as opposed to having to rip and replace everything?
Right. So let me say this in no uncertain terms. RPA is not a bad thing. It's a great thing. It's just not a comprehensive solution to most things. So, the short answer to your question, or to just kind of call out what you're saying, Adam, is that, RPA can potentially play well with others. It's just going to need the leveraging of other tools so that the information that it shares is sound, right? So there's some business logic applied to it, and that it's connecting with the systems that it needs to connect to in that instance. So as you said, in the spirit of full disclosure and just being, good corporate citizens here, yes, of course, we're vested in part of that solution, but we do our partners and our clients a disservice if we don't speak candidly about what part of that solution we support, and then what part our RPA partners tend to support as well. So, and it's because of that, right? Like, our platform is designed to interface with RPA platforms and to maximize the benefit across, multiple kinds of organizations.
Now, we do have various collateral available that describe some of these things. As we're coming up on time, we do have Q&A if people are interested. At the moment, I'm not showing any Q&A, but just kind of as a recap, I'd like for Jay just to kind of go through and reiterate some of the key points as everyone's evaluating an RPA project. Our goal is to create happy customers. And if happy customers can get better by using RPA, we're happy to look and applaud the effort. If they need to integrate with something else, we're obviously here to help. So Jay, maybe you just go through this end cap slide and then tell people how they can get in touch and contact us.
Sure. So, guys, to bring this to close, RPA, BPA, both. Again, the idea is to think about your digital vision. Think about the way you want to transform your company digitally, and the way you would like it to operate, both for your company and internally. The concept these days of having some massive rip and replace as a solution is really laughable, both because of expense and because of the challenges of implementing that. So I would promote that you take a Kaizen approach or an incremental approach to how you would want to do that. If you're thinking about RPA, challenge yourself this way. Are you working inside of a division, of a department for simple operation? If so, RPA is probably the best bet for you. If you're working interdepartmentally and across the whole of your organization, BPA is probably the solution that you want to onboard and understand that it's something that can be done and realized incrementally. What are the skill sets of the teams that you have on board, right? Is the IT team able to support programming scripts? Or is it able to support simple iconic programming flow? Those are the things that you might want to consider. And lastly, right, it's the scalability of the solution. There's a cost to start, but then there's the TCO and your total cost of operations when you're looking at scaling a solution across the whole of your organization definitely has to be considered, because the efficiencies that you gain could be lost in the cost that it takes you to gain them. And that's not what we want. So, at the end of it, what we would say is definitely reach out. You can reach anyone in the HULFT team, myself, Adam. You can just log on to www.hulftinc.com. You can contact us that way. We will be happy to consult with you. We'd be happy to walk you through what those work steps are, make sure you're ticking all of the boxes and making the best decision for your organization.
All right, with that, we're up on time. This could be the first time ever two sales guys having a conversation ended on time. Jay, appreciate the knowledge. Encourage everyone to come visit our website, look at collateral, reach out to Jay and myself or any of the team on LinkedIn. And thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Adam. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining.